this Ajna Center is really what powers all of our not self behaviors. This is one of the most interesting things I discovered in my learning about this human design body graph. So the key to waking up simply means that you're operating with awareness, you're not going around on autopilot, you're aware of how to make decisions as yourself. So waking up. It's a scientific fact that what we think, say, and do is initiated long before the neocortex. So our awareness happens in the deep gray areas of the brain, milliseconds before we are consciously aware of our thoughts. So the Ajna awareness is reactive. You'll hear Ra say it. We are not creative creatures, we are reactive. And it comes after a long chain of biochemical processes take place that the body is responsible for, that the body just simply does without our conscious awareness. So here's a link to an article for years ago that has the Scientific American describing what neuroscience says about this hot topic called free will. They say we're convinced that it exists, but new research suggests it might be nothing more than a trick the brain plays on itself. So can you imagine yourself, you might even be here still right now. If you've been studying design long enough, you might be able to let go of that belief system or that concept of I am in charge of my own reality. I create my own reality. Isn't that a common slogan that we hear all around? Doesn't it feel like when people are saying, the free will and law of attraction, all this stuff, this might be controversial to you. But this is one of the things that I recognize is a worthy concept of questioning. I have a totally undefined Ajna, and I am not certain of anything except that you and I are very different from each other. You and I, all of us, are here to see things very, very differently from each other. And the way that we see or perceive is different from each other because we are so different. So when you're looking at the conditioned mind, who you think you are identified with, if you haven't deconditioned long enough yet in human design, when you're looking at it, when you're observing it, what's watching? Who's watching the conditioned mind if it's not you? And this is a serious question. We are here to be a passenger on this vehicle. And that's the other thing I was thinking about. This is when I was taking a shower this morning. Thinking about this, we are the witness on top of this vehicle. If you go and take a look at the design of forms, which is actually what Ra was given. He was given the design of forms, not human design. He just recognized that human design was very practical, and he started to synthesize and put it out there right away. But the design of forms, if you start to look at what the design of a mammal is, they do not have Ajna and they do not have head. We are on top of this vehicle, this mammalian vehicle, having an experience of life, of this body's life. So what we're going to do today, where I want to focus my group, is that we're going to dive into the fears. We're gonna go into the mental anxieties that drive us to conceptualize and be clear or question our conceptualization process. So these are all the fears that we're going to go over. And so I just wanted to pop that into your awareness in case you haven't. All my students have seen this presentation prior to coming in. I do my best to give you the presentation beforehand so that you have some time to flip through it. Because this is one of the things that I've learned as a totally open Ajna. One of my tips and tricks for learning things is if you are going to read a book or if you are going to do any kind of mental processing, it's a very helpful thing to get that book, that presentation, whatever it is, and just scan it. Flip through and scan it quickly, kind of like your speed reading. Even if you don't know how to speed read, your brain is able to start processing that, especially for those of us who are emotional, giving us a little bit more time to feel these things out and to let the brain start doing its work. It really helps us with the processing of material, especially material like this, which is very dense. So this is one of my recommendations to you guys as students, is to take advantage of the hour before, if you can, if it's not too early where you are, to flip through the PDF and I'll do my best to get it to you an hour before class every time, okay? So your Ajna Center is the heart and soul of the dilemma of anybody who wants to wake up. Mind always wants to make decisions based on what it thinks is true about itself. So it develops these strategies through its relationship and experiences with the open centers. Oftentimes in our open centers, we have this receiving energy, right? That is polluted with experiences that are painful and information that is not ours. It's not ours consistently. It's not our genetic nature. So this is why the mind cannot be your personal authority. But we can, and here's the thing. Here's the trick. We can use the mind to recognize the not self. We can use our mind to see when we are operating, quote unquote, out of alignment. Now, I don't want you to take that and think, oh, there's something bad or wrong when you're operating out of alignment, because everything in this life is frequency. You are a frequency right now. And when we're interfacing with different frequencies, different things happen. Let's say that you're interfacing with a frequency that's kind of off from yours. It's not harmonic, it's not resonant, there's a dissonance. Can you control your behavior if you're in a dissonant place with something else, if you're a frequency? Can you control frequency? Tuning forks, if you play with tuning forks, you know how they resonate to each other? They vibrate, they harmonize. We are frequency. So when Ra wrote this book, the first book, he wrote it as a book called The Manual for No Fault Living. There is no fault, shame, blame, guilt, or problem with you observing, quote unquote, not self. Observing with awareness is everything. That's all there is to it. And that leads you to be more likely to be able to observe when you're operating in alignment. And over time, as you continue to decondition, your mind, your beautiful, brilliant Ajna, in whatever shape or form it comes in, defined or undefined, will be able to recognize you operating out of alignment. And when that happens, what I've noticed is one of the things that we get so caught up in our minds is, for me anyway, this is true, I want to know why things are happening. It feels like if I know the why, at least it eases the suffering. Now, I can tell you, having gone through a recent really deep, dark place, that even though I knew why, it did help keep the suffering from being as long, as protracted and as devastating as other kinds of experiences I've had before. And I'm talking about our romantic relationships, which, as we all know, have a really deep, tender place in our heart. This is where we have, carried around a lot of wounding. So in the past, I would have taken that experience and perhaps been spiraled down into a few months of deep, dark depression. And that's not the case anymore, because the moment that you can see what's going on and you allow your body to process whatever it needs to process, you can let it go. You can let go of like I said, the problems that you think that you did and the machinations of the mind trying to figure out what, if I could have only done this right, or if I changed this experience, if I'd not gone and done that, or if I could only say this, it would make everything better. That's just mind stuff. And so we're going to go into the fears of the mind and talk to how you guys are hearing that perhaps inside of your head. I want to invite the students to contribute. So just a couple more basic things before we dive into head first, because head is the pressure that pressurizes us to conceptualize. For those of you who are new, you may or may not know that we have a genetic imperative, that to reproduce is the first law of any organism. Go forth and multiply, right? This is not a personal thing that you are in charge of. This is your genetic programming. So if you are attracted to sameness, it tends to be too much sameness is not going to reproduce. The kind of diversity that is attractive to the genetic the genes as far as creating a diverse gene pool that is more likely to be healthy. So the body itself is the vehicle that has an inherent need to reproduce. The passenger is here to just watch the movie. And who we bond with is based on that difference. It's on our genetic attraction. Tends to be a lot of difference, just like this picture, somebody who's very short, somebody who's very tall. You'll notice when you start to do your partnership analysis, when you do connection charts, that people who have these centers all defined and people who have these centers all defined tend to come together in relationship. That is just showing you, illustrating the genetic attraction to difference. So the not self is a conditioning field. The strategies that arise from not self, and not self not being bad, just openness, not you, underneath the way the mind frames or justifies or rationalizes what it says you should do are these strategies. And so the things that really matter, you're taking it for granted, they're ignored because they don't attract you. They're not that interesting. And it's interesting, you guys, on Jovian Archive, I think it was, there were two comments from people who were very deeply in their experiment of deconditioning. And what they mentioned was that the thing that was right for them, other people would look and say, that's boring. You know, it's not as exciting. You know, that interest in stuff that's different, that's not you, has this excitement to it, this fear, this nervousness, this anxiety. So that's something also to be aware of. When you're in alignment, true self-behavior, strategy, and authority, the open centers are not blind or genetic imperatives to have something different or to make something that's not you consistent. These are places now where you're developing wisdom. So your potential wisdom via your open centers are going to be a place where you're receiving information and experiences where you can develop wisdom that becomes what we call outer authority. Now, the interesting thing, anybody, all of us can be outer authorities for others. What outer authority simply means is that there is a unique perspective that you and only you have. And when someone else comes to you to dialogue, to collaborate, to shoot the bull or whatever it is that they want to do, when there's a connection between the two of you, you can offer your differentiated perspective if they're asking, if they're inviting. That's outer authority. This is what I see. This is what I perceive. This is what is true for me. You oftentimes hear me going into my examples because that's what I know. So in this class, we really want to take a look at how is it that we be our own authority. We're diving deeper into the mechanics that you started to unveil in LYD and ABC. And when we use our strategy and authority to make correct decisions, we are going to notice its difference in our life, and we're going to notice how everything in the chart is a duality. It's a binary. There's a this and a that. When the emotional wave is operating in alignment, it shows up very differently than when the emotional wave is operating out of alignment. And that's a generality I just mentioned. That's true about every single channel and about every single gate. So the channels are our focus in this course. By being our own authority, this is a slide that Darshana put in last time we did this. It's honoring your type and your strategy and your inner authority that allows the higher self to be authentically expressed with the least resistance. Being your own authority empowers you to develop wisdom potential by correct conditioning, which is where we are nourished. It nourishes our designs, the connections that we have with our social environment, and our connection indeed to the entire global civilization that we are a part of. So an example of this would be wisdom, open heart, witness, developing the wisdom to recognize who has the will to prove themselves and to support the tribe. You know that this is tribal. If you've gone through ABCs, you know that this is about support. So the wisdom, the correct decision making is not about you proving yourself if you've got an undefined heart, but knowing who can support the tribe and recognizing their support. So in your undefined center, chain reaction that can happen, there's the openness that amplifies and distorts and overreacts and misunderstands, or when you have this knowledge and you utilize strategy and authority, or you correctly focus. When you're distorted, if you're aware of the mechanics, you're recognizing when you're distorted. Example, I was in a relationship where I had I have gate 21 in an undefined heart center. It's in a third line. Third line is about being able to make and break bonds and have an experience of making mistakes, and the gate is about control. So when I recognize, I go into control mode. Oh, this is not happening. You know, the authoritarian, you're wrong, I'm right, or I'm wrong, you're right. That's a distortion, and the correct focus. I know if I'm in this hierarchical dominant submission mode that I need to go back to, what is my emotional authority telling me? Am I bitter? Am I happy about this? Or am I sad? You know, just to be aware of it so that over time, I know that I can have a correct focus and observe without evaluation of myself. Oh, I'm good because I'm right, or I'm wrong because I'm bad, or whatever it is. Instead of the evaluation of self in all of your open centers, you can go to wisdom through correct awareness when you have this knowledge. So how you're controlled when you're bitter, frustrated, angry, disappointed, you're identifying with conditioning or behaviors that came from the conditioning to make decisions that leads you to creation of conditioned not self behaviors. The not self behaviors will lead you to this. Okay, those are the basic fundamental experiences that we have as a generality. Now, it doesn't matter. For the most part, yes, projectors are going to be bitter, but they could be frustrated and angry and disappointed just as well, because we all of us have everything in the body graph. Okay, those are just signposts that you went off track. Oops, hello. You went off track into the bushes. You're not on the road anymore. You're not on your path. You're on the bumps. But sometimes taking these little detours is actually really beneficial to your awareness, especially when you're doing this experiment over time. So again, centers fixed, flexible are either active, defined, or dormant, undefined, and open. The wisdom is open receptors are adaptive and resilient, in that if you don't attach to them as yours, you can just let go of that conditioning and receive new energy. And that potential wisdom in your open centers is where we want to focus your awareness that that is not your decision-making process. So these centers have a binary functioning. They're defined or they're undefined. They're maybe defined in a conscious way, or they're defined in an unconscious way, a body way, a kinesthetic kind of energy that's just emitting and you're surprised by it when it comes out way. Or you also have a healthy and an unhealthy way. So those are all places that we want to make sure that you're really aware of. If you don't know those off the top of your head, time to go back and review your Living Your Design course. And those of you who sign up by the end of today, tomorrow, if you're emotional, you're welcome to join a new LYD course that I'm starting whenever I do that down in the future for review. So your centers, defined versus undefined, your gates can be conscious, and channels can be conscious, gate, channel, or unconscious, out of a defined center and a dormant center. That should be a review for everybody. Just restating the language so that you're really comfortable with the definition of these words. Conditioning receptors is one that you want to be aware of, because this, the conscious or unconscious gate, in this undefined center is a dormant potential, and that is going to condition the way that you experience that center. So let's say it again. This center is conditioned by the way that you are imprinted to learn about this center. When you have it completely open, this is something that you've worked on in many, many lifetimes up until this point. You are not working on a specific, focused kind of way of learning about the center, whatever its function happens to be. You're taking in the totality of ways that you could experience, in this example, conceptualization. in this example, inspiration is conditioned by wanting to understand the mysteries and unconsciously being confused by past experiences. And that's the way it's always going to get turned on. In whatever way it happens to be imprinted, there's always going to be a line below the surface, different levels of variations of how this gate is designed to function when it gets turned on. So your crystals of consciousness, back to what I quizzed you about earlier, you can see that the personality crystal is affiliated with you, yourself, reflected consciousness. What's going on, the witness, the passenger, is up here. The design crystal and the monopole, magnetic monopole, are actually partners. They go hand in hand, and when they separate is when your body starts to get built. This is what creates the illusion, is these two separating, and the magnetic monopole, single magnet, singly pulling magnet, is what's holding design crystal and personality crystal together so that we have this body, this vehicle, this life. The head is just a pressure. The root is a motor and a pressure. Neither one of these are an authority in your life for deciding action, for manifesting anything. They're just pressures in and of themselves. So that means then the authority is elsewhere in the design. The head is the pressure to think about questions of life, and the head fuels and pressurizes our ajna to formulate concepts, to deal with life's questions, to rationalize, to realize. All of this processing is happening because of the head. The head is pressurizing ajna. So that's what we're going to go into. The pineal gland in the head center, and there's the ajna, the pituitary glands. Both of these are very important endocrine system glands that are creating the chemistry within your body. So when you're observing your mind's cycling and processing inside of your head about yourself, oftentimes that can affect the way that the pineal and the pituitary operate. It can cause disease and dysfunction. One of the most common ones is not being able to sleep. You did something, alignment with your mind, rather than, you know what this is in Hawaii, we call this crazy, right? I don't know if you guys do it here, but while I was growing up, we called it lolo, because pakalolo means marijuana, and it's, you know, makes you crazy. So yeah, when your mind is cycling like this and you made a decision that's crazy making because now you're up in the middle of the night and you're thinking about, wow, I should have done this and I should have done that. That's your mind succumbing to the pressure to make a decision based on what you think you know, which can create, my mind wants to say disillusionment and disharmony. It can create suffering. So just to be aware that if you're having trouble with those organs, it can be sourced back to, one of the things that it can be sourced back to is making decisions out of alignment with your personal authority. All of us are extraordinary. No one of us is more special than anybody else. Your mind as an inner authority can create conditioning. Your mind is not an inner authority. All the mind is good for is outer authority, really attracted to what it is not just up here, head ajna, but anything in the body graph that it is not. Ooh, what's that? That's interesting. So open head will try to resolve pressures that aren't theirs. Open heart will try to take on, promises that aren't theirs to make. Just appreciate the question, when we're talking about head center again, without feeling the responsibility personally of solving it. Living your design will allow those anxieties to become less and less pressurized. This is one thing someone told me yesterday. I've worked really hard on myself. If you just relax into strategy and authority, it's more about observing rather than doing anything about any of these things that we're talking about today. Just observing. The observation of your mind as you're consciously aware of what's yours and what's not yours is what is going to shift your frequency over time. It takes a really long time. Ajna Center, why is this so important? What is its function? Conceptualizing. So let's take a look at this wheel. Isn't that interesting? It looks kind of like, if you remember what we looked at, was it sacral? It had this like kind of spiraling energy. Look at that beautiful alignment of those gates. So where are the gates? Let's just look at this. Here at the top, we have 2 gates in the quarter of mutation, purpose fulfilled through transformation, 43 and 11. Here on this side, we have the first quarter, purpose fulfilled through mind. We have the 17 and we have the 24. And then look at this, guys. Do you see this? This is the quarter of civilization. 2 is the beginning. 33 is the end. 2 to 33, those gates right there, that civilization, are all purpose fulfilled through form. What do you notice now about the Ajna Center? We got 2 more gates, 4 and 47, purpose fulfilled through bonding. What can we say about Ajna? No gates in what quarter? No form at all. Nope. Exactly, Sonia. Isn't that cool? I love looking at these slides as we go through this class, because this is where we start to bring them in, is actually extrapolating out those gates from those centers into the wheel so that we can see how they relate to other gates, the gates next to each other. They're genetically similar, and where in the wheel they lie. It's not our form exactly, Jasmine. So here's your test. Ajna Center is about conceptualization. So what are the characteristics of this Ajna Center? What's the biological correlation? It's not the pineal, so it must be
the pituitary and hypopituitary.
Thank you, the pituitaries, the pituitary glands. And then what else is the type of center? What kind of center is this? What does it do? What's its job? Awareness. What kind of awareness? Yes, exactly. Jasmine says pit. It's a pit. It's mental awareness. Thank you, guys. Good job. So what's its function then? What do we say about its function?
Conceptualization.
Thank you. And then your defined Ajna Center, what's its job? What is it consistently here to do or be in the world? What are these people here to perform as their fixed way of thinking? Deliver concepts. What else? And that's the operative word here about the conceptualization. Find certainty. Thank you, Ian. That's exactly it. The certainty that they're here to put out into the world, that's their gift. They are certain about some of their opinions, aren't they? Have you ever tried to argue with a 1762 or an 1156? Or anybody that has any of these channels defined? They're here to be certain, right? So the undefined Ajna Center, what's its job? Pretend to be certain. No, that's the conditioned piece. Let's see. Ian says, certainly maybe only Conley works medium term, not absolute. I see. But what in an undefined Ajna Center, what's its job? If we had recognize who's mentally inspiring, what do we have here? Recognize others' minds. Yeah, recognize who's certain. Who's certain, exactly. Who knows what they're freaking talking about? Right? Okay. And so then the not self strategy of an undefined Ajna, what is it? What does it do? What is it about? It was mentioned earlier. Yep. Pretend to be certain. Trying to prove we know what we're talking about. Exactly. The very opposite. Needing certainty. Pretending to be certain. Exactly. So if you're pretending to be certain, and you've got this really rigid belief system, or you're really trying to prove that you're right, doesn't that feel off than somebody who has a quiet certainty? Somebody who just knows they know what they're talking about? It's very, very different. Now we're at the pituitary, the Ajna Center. And these pituitary glands, thank you for your participation, guys, that was fun, are located at the base of the brain. This is referred to as our master gland. Here's why all of the not self strategies can be linked back to Ajna, because the Ajna is connected up through hormones, through the endocrine system, to every other center in the body. And this is why, and you have this awareness that you think is in control or is in charge, and it's actually the body operating the way that it's designed to operate. So this master gland is a point of convergence and coordination with the body's two integrative mechanisms, the nervous and the endocrine systems. Nervous system and the endocrine systems. That's how it's connected up to everything else in the body. So all centers are directly related biologically to the nervous and the endocrine system glands, or systems, not glands. I said glands because I was looking at that. Okay, so this is the pituitary gland. Glands. Ajna functioning is that this is a central processing hub that gives the mind the illusion of being in control. So because of its connection with every other center, it can cause all sorts of problems when it's not used correctly. This connection allows the mind the ability to express characteristics of the other centers. So if you're processing the past and you're starting to get sad about what happened in the past, this is because your connection with your Ajna has a connection to everything else in the body, the nervous system, the lungs, the sadness that you feel, the recollection can bring up those emotions again, as an example. So Ajna, again, is key to waking up. If you're understanding the correct role of the Ajna, this helps you be more aware. And the pituitaries, remember, give us this illusion of being in control, even though we're not. The Ajna works so quick, we think it's making the decisions. And just because you can see what's happening doesn't mean that you're driving the car. So Ian is writing, Ajna seems conscious, but it's really quite unconscious. It depends on what your design is. But yeah, you're right. When viewed from this perspective, the operation or the connection of Ajna to all the other centers and how you're filtering all that internal data, that self-reflection, conceptualization about yourself, yeah, the biological correlation, that stuff doesn't happen with your awareness because it happens so fast. It's so fast. The article that I pointed you to that had the 7-centered versus 9-centered earlier in the presentation, it's all black and the Rave body graph is like reversed. The colors look different. That will take you to an article that describes for you how we went from 7-centered to 9-centered. And when we were 7-centered, we had 90,000 years of focusing ourselves as a species on this Ajna developmental process. And the Ajna was the key for our survival, our strategic focusing on Ajna, as the end-all be-all for decision-making. We were very easily ruled back then. We were not our authority at all. Now, with the development of the solar plexus, and we're mutating into a form that has spirit consciousness and awareness, this is something totally different, this vehicle, this body, this 9-centeredness. So it's not about deciding with the Ajna, but we have 90,000 years of conditioning that makes us believe that we can trust mind. And that's not the case with these vehicles. In 1781, we all went through an upgrade. So here, and that's, I'm teaching somebody who was certain of his concepts, his process, his logics. Remember, you take everything and you filter it through your own filter, and you utilize strategy and authority to decide what is right for you to utilize in your life. So the question that we want to ask ourselves with the Ajna, am I trying to convince everyone that I am certain of something that I have no certainty about? Certainty is a mental state of being without doubt. It's about being confident and assured. Confidence isn't something that you have to put out into the world. You know, when you're confident, it's a quiet internal confidence. You have a certainty. You're not trying to have fights or argue to be right. So the Ajna Center in and of itself, all of these gates are here to have their own kind of mental certainty that is designed to be invited out of you. When you're invited, recognized, and you're clear mentally, you can share your outer authority. Again, this is mental mind's process is brilliant at justifying, rationalizing, measuring, weighing, comparing, all of that stuff, but it's for outside, it's not for inside.